Welcome to All Boy, our first episode. I'm Chance Seales, dad of twin boys, longtime Washington news correspondent, and a seeker of solid advice. You probably are too. You're here. The subject matter is serious, but we are happy warriors in this place because the mission's good, creating a central hub to tackle the biggest challenges facing America's 65 million boys and men under the age of 30. Two quick things off the top, then we're jumping right into our conversation about redshirting boys in schools. First of all, I picked the name All Boy on purpose. It is not considered a compliment to be all boy. Millions of men have absorbed the message that you're too rough, too masculine, too loud, too soft, too toxic. You're bad. But ask a mom, ask a dad, a pastor, a teacher, ask a man. Many feel hopeless and need a lifeline, resources to build a family, healthy spiritual and political pathways. Dating, sex, even asking a girl out feels outlandish to many. Second, I did mention asking a girl out. I know that is heteronormative, but I'm speaking in averages here. My family, for instance, has two dads, but you'll hear me talk a lot about moms because most families have one. We're going to focus on girlfriends and wives because most men want one. I reassure you, though, we will get to the full range of male experience. Today, beginning at the beginning of school, should more parents redshirt their boys in kindergarten? Hold them back 1 year. Dr. Michael Thompson is a clinical psychologist, the godfather of the redshirting movement in America, and pioneering author of best-selling books like The Pressured Child, Speaking of Boys, Raising Cain, I love that one, and a whole lot more. Michael, so good to see you. Welcome to All Boy.
Thank you, Chance. I'm delighted to be with you.
Let's start at the beginning of this movement. You have been on this path, really an evangelist for a long time before a lot of us had heard of it, redshirting boys. Can you just explain how that works?
Well, something that's completely obvious to me is that the growth curve of girls and the growth curve of boys is different. Duh. All you have to do is look at sixth grade girls who are turning into women and seventh grade girls, some of them who look like women, and seventh grade boys who look like little disorganized puppies still a lot of the time. I mean, never mind the height differential between boys. Yeah. So why this escapes anybody, but it also means that brain development is somewhat different. I was in California speaking at an all-girls school, which was sponsoring a summer program for all boys. And this all-girls school was sponsoring because they wanted to sponsor a single sex. They're striking a blow for single sex. So this was a program for mainly Black and Hispanic boys, a kind of Reach Academy thing where they could get a summer start. And I was talking about the difference between ninth grade boys and ninth grade girls, saying ninth grade girls are much closer to 10th grade girls, and ninth grade boys are much closer to 8th grade boys. It's about an 18-month split in pubertal growth, but also in the growth of the abstract brain. Mm-hmm, mm-hmm. And I said, has anybody here ever taught ninth grade English? And actually, the head of the girls' school raised her hand and said, yes, I taught at ninth grade English. And I said, in a co-ed situation. And do you remember how many abstract thinkers you had among the girls? Yes, she said. And do you remember the boys? And do you remember how many concrete thinkers you had? And she said, actually, I kind of don't remember the boys. And I thought, that tells the whole story.
It kind of says it.
Ninth grade boys are not that interesting in an English class compared with the girls who are abstract thinkers. And I'm glad that woman's now running an all-girls school. But the same problem exists in kindergarten. The girls take to language faster. Whenever I say girls, I'm talking about the average girl. And whenever I talk about boys, I'm talking about the average boy. Because there are boys who are verbal stars, who are early readers in kindergarten. I'm not talking about them. I'm talking about the average boy and the average girl. And girls take to language faster. Girls as a group tend to use language the way adults do much more than boys do. And boys use language to smack each other down and to organize games.
They use
And to be
language.
fun.
They use their hands, Michael. I mean,
Yeah.
my sons are 5, and
Yes.
at 4 going into PK4,
Yeah.
one of them was a wild Mustang. It could not be stopped. Has the most beautiful, wonderful, competent, talented teacher, and he ran through there like a wild boar. It was incredible.
Yep. Got it. And boys are a challenge to schools for a simple reason. By school age, three quarters of the boys are more physically active than any girl.
3/4.
So when it comes to physicality, when it comes to the human brain, it's 90% overlapping. Our brains are much more human than they are gendered. But when it comes to physicality, there's only a 1/4 overlap at the start of school. So the girls are all sitting there in a circle waiting for the teacher to start reading, and the boys are pigpiling on each other or walking around the room in a spacey daze, or hit each other. And they are a greater challenge to the classroom. So that translates all the way through school. And in Raising Cain, the chapter, which I wrote, Dan, my co-author, said, you work in elementary schools. And the chapter is called Thorns Among Roses. And that's always the way it feels in school, that the boys are the thorns among roses, right? And teachers have to deal with that. And they have to deal with it by being clear, by having effective discipline, but also letting boys know they love them as they are. And that's a trick, actually. Because if you're a teacher, and I started out my career as a middle school teacher, if you're a teacher and you're consumed by the wish that the boys would act more like the girls, you're doomed. Because they aren't going to, right? You have to take them as they are and give them what they need, which is love and respect and clarity and limits. But now look, 5-year-olds are all impulse, right?
Yes.
Their brains haven't myelinated. Chance, you got to be waiting for 7 for when their brain's myelinated. Things will get better, right?
We thought it was going to be 3. We thought it'd be 4. And
Yeah.
I'm seeing glimmers. I am, but it's that consistency you're talking about. And can I ask you, in
Please.
redshirting, let's say you have a talented bookworm, linguistic star boy. Should he just start school as normal, or should we, as a matter of course, just hold all boys back 1 year?
All right. So in my book, It's a Boy, I tackle this question. And I got this axiom from a special, somebody who did early childhood evaluations. When in doubt, leave them out. When in doubt, leave them out. But you don't make the decision yourself. You don't make the decision by going to an outside psychologist. And I say that as an outside psychologist. Don't go to somebody who sees your child in an office on their own, even after a neuropsych evaluation. Go to the pre-K teachers. Go to the preschool teachers who've seen your son in a group of boys and knows where he lands. Is he in the middle? Is he on the advanced maturity end, or is he on the wild, uninhibited, uncontrolled end of things? If so, he stays. He doesn't go on to kindergarten because he's not ready. Look, Chance, let's talk about maturity for a second. What is maturity? When you look at a human being, how do you evaluate their maturity? It's self-control. It's self-control physically and self-regulation emotionally. Okay? And self-reg and self-control are the hallmarks of maturity all the way up. And it just takes boys longer to develop it. So the redshirting has to do with the fact that the arc of development is different for boys and girls. And kindergarten is one of the places where the gap is the largest.
I see.
Middle school is the other place where the gap is the largest. Late elementary, not so obvious a gap between fifth grade girls and boys. Yeah,
Which
yeah.
I do want to get there because later on, the physiological and neurological development is something that's striking and visible in boys versus girls. But before we get there, I did want to note that in your book, Raising Cain, which I loved, by the way, that you say the first 2 years of school is really important. And there was this one quote in here. It says, many boys who were turned off to school at a young age never refine motivation to become successful learners. So it is important to start them off on the right foot, it seems, even if the bigger, visible changes come maybe 10 years later.
And there's ample research to suggest that a good preschool experience, a good Head Start experience, can make a school career. That you see the higher grades, you see the higher achievement scores from kids who had good schooling, and that's why I think Head Start is so important. But I had a colleague who worked in the south side of Chicago, which is the largest black ghetto in the United States, and she said many boys experience Head Start as jail. Because it's sit down, be quiet, sit down, be quiet, sit down, be quiet. And teachers have to know that boys can learn while they're on their feet, that boys can learn while lying on their stomachs on the floor, that boys can learn while reading under a table. When I walk into a pre-K classroom and their kids, their boys all pigpiling on each other, but they have books in their hands and they're showing each other stuff in books, I think, yes, there's a teacher who can tolerate boy chaos and still is able to set them on the track to learning. That's not easy. That is really not easy. My son is a first grade teacher in New York, and he talks about self-regulation all the time. He is always working with first grade boys on self-regulation.
And I don't know if it's possible everywhere, but for instance, here in Washington, D.C., my sons go to a public Montessori charter school.
Nice.
And the cohort, PK3, PK4, kindergarten, and then you go up and it's 1, 2, and 3, and they're all together. And there's this modeling, and they want to be like the older kids.
Yes.
And they see how it goes. And there's kind of this, I've heard Jonathan Haidt talk about this, of this, tiny little microcosm of a society where the older kids are telling the younger kids what to do. And and that seems to work really well. Is that a better model than come in, circle up, sit down, be quiet?
Well, there are many better models than sit down, be quiet. Although there have to be times in the day when you're teaching children that kind of self-control. But it's something that you can say to kids. This is going to be hard for you. Let's do this. Let's see if we can do it for 4 minutes. Right? Can your son sit for 4 minutes?
Sure. Yeah.
Especially if they're watching something on a screen, right?
Yeah, their teachers are very good. They do it now. I see them. I see their curiosity. Yeah.
Yeah, actually, self-control is a skill, and you have to learn to manage your impulsivity, and that's what teachers need to do with boys. But that's part of the project. If you just get frustrated because the boys don't naturally sit down and open a book and look at a page. And having worked with enough little boys with some kind of learning difference or developing reading skills slowly, they open a book and the all that print just swims in front of their faces, and they want to scream, they want to put their heads down on the desk in discouragement. There have to be many more ways to introduce them to reading, and one of the things that Montessori does so well is they have a multi-sensory approach. Look at all of the hands-on materials in a Montessori classroom. My son Will went to Montessori school, so I'm a fan.
Yes, and you mentioned in the book there are some schools they put a jump rope in the hallway, And it's
Yeah.
usually the little boy that wants to go out and do that. And I've seen that with my son's teachers, that they say, all right, 5 minutes, the kids who really need it, go get your extra jiggles out, and then you come back in and you sit down and work with your materials. And you mentioned learning differences. What's going on with all of the learning disability diagnoses? Are they on target? Is it because boys are going in too early that they're a problem, or they're just not ready? Or are these true disabilities? What are we seeing here?
Well, over the course of my career, the number of American boys diagnosed with ADHD has moved from 3% to 11%. Many countries don't have the diagnosis. It's not a diagnosis in Finland. The Finnish public TV once came to interview me, and they said, we want to interview you about this ADHD thing because we don't have it. I'm sure in Norway, where they have outdoor kindergartens, you know what an outdoor kindergarten is?
I've seen. I think
Where
I've seen.
they're never inside.
Uh-huh.
They're right to a Norwegian winter. They're outside. You're not going to have a lot of problems with excess physicality if you're running a kindergarten outside. Many Americans might think that's it's a little chilly. I happen to think it builds your strength. So at any rate, what we have to do is, but I lost the thread there. Help me out.
Oh, yeah. Are we over-diagnosing boys with learning
Oh yeah,
disabilities?
thank you. So my dear friend Ned Hallowell, child psychiatrist, wrote "Driven to Distraction: Answers to Distraction," and "Married to Distraction." He has the whole distraction franchise, and a new book called ADHD 2.0. And he will make the very strong argument that putting some kids on medication just makes school bearable for them. That it's the only way they can be in a school building without being in constant trouble. One study many years ago found that 80% of the interactions that an ADHD boy has are being reproached or scolded. 80% of their day is being scolded. Well, those kids are going to come out hating school. So if we can find them the absolutely most hyperactive of them and give them medication, that's something. If we can recognize and put them in an alternative classroom, it might make it more bearable
I see.
for them.
So you're saying highly targeted, not just, it can't be a spray shot, because I mean, some people are saying at this point it can be a luxury diagnosis. You get extra time on tests. The teacher might get a little bit of a break because the kid's not being so wild. The parents feel like, okay, well, at least there's an explanation for why this is happening, and that takes a little bit of the pressure off of them. So you're saying some cases, yes, if it's highly targeted.
There's another problem, which is the No Child Left Behind Act began telling teachers, if you don't get these test scores out of these kids, we're going to call you a failing school and a failing teacher. And that happened nationwide. And I don't have the evidence to prove it, but the ADHD diagnosis went way up when teachers came under pressure themselves to produce these test scores. And I think many teachers were saying, I can't get the level of work I need out of this kid, we'll call him ADHD. Or I can't get him to sit in the chair and pay attention. So I did my PBS documentary in 2006, which was just a few years after the No Child Left Behind Act. And one review of the film said, maybe Thompson's best suggestion is 2 recesses a day for boys. But what was happening in schools is that they were eliminating recess entirely to get more seat time. And if you get more seat time, you drive boys crazy. Boys are more effective learners if they have more recess time.
That makes sense. So I want to get to the middle school section in one moment, but real quick, it seems like wealthy parents are the ones doing the redshirting. You
Right.
work a lot with programs that are, low income or disadvantaged. Who should be redshirting that isn't?
Well, upper middle class parents read an enormous amount, and they want to advantage their sons. There are many dads who are obsessed about high school sports, so they want to hold a kid back. So he's when he gets to ninth grade, he's already well embarked on puberty, and he has a chance to make a varsity team. I think that's a corrupt. Never mind. Don't have me go down that road. What I know is that parents who read are aware of these issues, and they want to redshirt their boys because they don't want them to be the youngest in the class. They don't want them, and they've read Malcolm Gladwell,
Outliers,
right?
yeah.
And Malcolm Gladwell, had all the data on if you hold your son back, he's much more likely to play hockey at a higher level. And the Canadians went nuts over that recommendation. So did a lot of American ice hockey parents. So athletically ambitious parents, but parents who don't want their child disadvantaged. But you have to do it on a case-by-case basis, because there are boys who are verbal stars. There are boys who take to schools. There are boys who are conversationalists of the kind that girls are, and they're going to holding them back in school is going to bore them. And that is a problem. That's why you go to the preschool teacher and say, "Is he ready?"
Is he ready?
You go to the pre-K teacher and say, "Is he ready?" And I am somebody my mother always said I was held back in nursery school because I couldn't tie my shoes. I think it was more issues than tying my shoes, but my mother was being nice about it. I was immature.
Interesting. And it works out because, okay, that gets us where we want to go then, Michael. That means you are 1 year older in perpetuity. And that also means in middle school and in high school eventually, when the parts of the brain that are really I've seen it called CEO of the brain, the prefrontal cortex, are developing, boys are later.
Executive function, yeah.
Can you explain that?
Well, executive functioning is a whole set of skills that have to do with organization and looking ahead, anticipating, time management, and more girls are better at it. The average girl's better at it earlier than boys. But girls tend to be more motivated for school because it fits in better with the girl identity, to be a very good student among girls who are very good students. The boy identity is to be a wise alecky, fun guy who's highly humorous and very athletic, right?
Cool guy. Yeah.
Those are the boys. Those are the dudes in sixth grade. They rule.
Yeah.
And it doesn't have to do
I wanted
with
to be one of those, and I wasn't.
Nor was I. I was the bookish editor of the school paper, and I wrote editorials saying the school's overemphasized athletics. I mean, that'll get you into the Nerd Hall of Fame. And now I'm the psychologist for an all-boys athletic powerhouse school.
There you go.
I really appreciate that the impact that coaches can have on boys, and especially teacher coaches. But that's another discussion. What I want is for boys to have their parents look at them, consult with their teachers, decide if redshirting is the right thing, and you make that decision. You make that decision either before kindergarten, or you make it before, usually in sixth grade.
Okay. Now,
Right.
how about beyond the prefrontal cortex, though? I've also read that parts that are related to emotion, the cerebellum, the hippocampus, and things like that can be involved. Is that the case?
Well, the story is not all neurological. A lot of it is psychological. You have to be treated well as a child, and loved and held and nurtured. That gives you what one writer called habits of the heart. Then you have to be given developmentally challenging expectations at every level. Take your plate to the sink, have good table manners, over and over and over and over and over. I was doing a father's evening at a public school in Massachusetts, and he said, I'm trying to teach my late elementary kids table manners, and like I've been reminding them 120 times. When are they going to get it?
Don't toot at the table.
You're you're not 120 times, you're not even close, right? 480 times, 1,020 times, over and over and over. These are habits of practice. And then they're habits of mind, being able to recognize what is a moral moment. So I'm talking to a school now that has suspended a fifth grader because he was giving the finger to his teacher and been doing it. And his parents are now saying, well, that's developmentally appropriate boy behavior. And I said, well, actually, it's developmentally appropriate bad boy behavior.
Right. Right.
And if you don't whack him in fifth grade, what kind of a seventh grader is he going to be?
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Right?
Yeah.
I mean, if he's a rude, disrespectful fifth grader. So before we get in, talk about the cerebellum, about which we can't do that much. You notice I retreated to the land of psychology.
It's okay.
Habits of the heart, habits of practice, habits of mind. That builds self-control and self-regulation in kids.
Where should parents find that balance? Because I grew up, my parents were not afraid to spank. We don't spank, but my parents, they were we're going to the bathroom, and we knew what was happening in the bathroom was you're getting swatted. And it worked, but I just would not, I couldn't with my kids. A day after there's some sort of conflict or tension, I go and I feel sad about it, but I know that it has to happen at times. But when people are trying to figure out where is that line, for instance, you say in the book about grade school, it's largely a feminine environment populated predominantly by women teachers and authority figures that seems rigged against boys, against the higher activity level, lower level of impulse control that is normal for boys. And you highlight one teacher who said, I hug my kids when they come into class. This is for younger kids. I hug my kids. And so I often wonder, where is that line between authoritative parenting, which we know is supposed to be the best form of parenting, and also the moments when you say, I can see you need a hug right now.
Well, there's nothing about authoritative parenting that doesn't include a hug. The term comes from Diana Baumrind at Berkeley, UC Berkeley, who did a longitudinal study and found that authoritative parenting, high responsiveness, high demand. High responsiveness, so hugging is partly responsiveness. But it breaks my heart that our fears of child sexual abuse means that public school teachers can't touch kids anymore, because many kids, many boys in particular, who don't, their bodies are just like that, and a hand on the shoulder. So at one point the instructions came out about what psychologists can do in their office, and the instruction was you can never touch a client. And I thought, well, I'm in trouble, because I shake hands with every boy who's ever come into my office, and I shake hands with him on the way out, and I put my hand on his shoulder. And I watch principals and heads of private schools who stand out in front of their school in the morning and touch every kid. And that's what I'm talking about. If just kids tumble out of the car, scattered, agitated because they've been fighting with their brother in the back seat, and they're just not ready for school, how do you settle them? Mm-hmm. A loving voice, a clear ritual. Well, I don't know about you, but my son Will, when he had a teacher in Montessori, and they all sat, and she lit a candle at the beginning of the day. Nothing like fire to focus a boy. I'm sorry. There's something about the little bit of danger, the ritual, and I don't know whether a public school teacher, I've never heard of a public school teacher doing it, but in Montessori school, it was a part of the day that my son loved. And there are things you can do, but touch is one of them. And it breaks my heart that our fears about child sexual abuse have eliminated loving, calming touch.
Well, and even if you can't hug your students, and I'm hoping some teachers are watching right now, including male teachers, because we need more male teachers. But, I once had on one of the leading education researchers in America. She's from Vanderbilt, and she did this longitudinal study that went on forever and ever. And I said, what is the number one attribute you would want for your child if they were going to school? And I thought she'd have some soaring ideal. And she said, warmth. That just having a warm teacher, creating an environment where kids really feel like I can mess up and then I can thrive, that's the key.
The essential elements of a school are teachers who like kids. That's most important. Teachers who've gotten burned out and don't like kids, the kids know it immediately. So is that translated as warmth? Yes, it does. They have to be warm. They have to be glad to see a classroom full of kids. If a teacher is dreading that, he or she shouldn't be in teaching anymore. But then what you want is competence, clarity, predictability, and developmentally appropriate challenges. Right?
Yeah.
So it's warmth combined with let's get at it. Let's do some significant work here. And then it's giving kids self-efficacy, agency, and things where the kid thinks, whoa, if I do that, I feel smarter. I'm developing mastery, right? And I stuck with that problem with the coaching of my teacher. And Carol Dweck at Stanford calls this a growth mindset. But a teacher who is helping kids to become problem solvers, to have a sense of agency and have a growth mindset, she's doing all she should. And the boys will respond to that too.
And the kids will never forget it. We all have those teachers, probably one that really sticks out. I remember Miss Cherry, second grade. I remember how she sounded, this gravelly voice, and she'd come up to you in her silk skirts. And I remember just how it felt being around her and thinking, she's tough, but she wants me to do well, and I believe I can. And part of this is about the stories that kids are telling themselves about who they are, what they can do. But the other side of it, as you say, is the stories maybe some teachers have going on internally as well. And you mentioned archetypes and how we oftentimes think about boys. If someone's thinking, okay, how do I improve my classroom? How do they go about that?
Well, there are lots of ways to do it. I recommend to teachers a book that they, in co-ed schools, never come across, because it was written about all boys schools. It was written by Michael Reichart and Rick Hawley. Reichart's a psychologist for the Haverford School in Philadelphia, an all-boys school, and Rick Hawley headed an all-boys school in Cleveland. He's retired. And the book is called Reaching Boys, Teaching Boys. And then they wrote a second book called I Can Learn From You, Boys as Relational Learners. And the bottom line is that if you're going to reach boys in a classroom, movement, teamwork, competition, right? A public exhibition, something involving technology, and then a hook or a mystery. Every chemistry teacher knows that. If they can have an explosion or precipitate out something,
You got 'em.
we're all waiting for that, right?
Yeah.
That's the science teachers have that hook, but you can do it in other ways. So that's movement, teamwork. So many teachers tend to idealize working alone, sitting alone quietly in your chair. And if you notice, the movement, teamwork, and a public exhibition is entirely different from that.
Yep.
Boys won't sit. 10th grade boys won't sit and read a Shakespeare play with any pleasure, but they will act out a scene and learn the lines, especially if they've got some cardboard swords. So, right?
Yep.
There's lots of swordplay in that. But then Reichart and Hawley went on to say that boys are relational learners. Boys only learn if they have a strong relationship with the teacher. And that small book, I Can Learn From You, is, I think, so instructive for teachers, because they interviewed hundreds of boys and said, why do you work for your teacher? What is it about your teacher that makes you want to work for them? Isn't that...
It's when they had a relationship with them?
Well, yes, and they care about my life outside of school. They know something, and they have a sense of humor. They temper their discipline with mercy from time to time.
Yes.
You know?
That gets me to the part where I'd like to finish, which is boys are a lot about action and expression, but the interior life of boys is rich. You know, there's a lot more going on below the ocean surface than we even know to this point. I mean, we've been to other planets, but we don't even know what happens in parts of the ocean. And so the surface of a boy many times looks wild or stoic or whatever, but there's a lot happening inside.
Of course there is.
And a lot of boys are struggling emotionally. Suicidality is far too high. How do we improve their EQ or their emotional intelligence at the same time as we improve these other facets?
Okay. We discussed this in the last chapter of Raising Cain. 8 things you need to do for boys. And one is you talk to them in a language they understand, right? So I've done high school kind of groups, psychotherapy groups, and it doesn't start with we're all going to share, and with it, we're going to start with confidentiality. I was my counselor at Belmont Hill School. We ran the family group, which was a euphemism for your family's a mess, and your parents are breaking up, or your father's having an affair. It's just your family's a mess. A group we called the family group, and we would start off by saying, "Does anybody have a family who's driving them crazy? Just driving you up the wall?" We didn't start with, "Now we're going to share our feelings." Anybody brave enough to talk about that? And if an older boy would start, maybe a good athlete, boom, we had our group. And then we'd stop at a certain point. The counselor and I would say, "Now look, you guys, we got to protect the privacy of this boy, right? Can we all agree to that?" And of course, by that time, some boy had taken a risk and they knew it. It was an entirely different strategy. But that's talking to boys in their language and also appealing to their pride as good friends and their pride in being a boy who commands the respect of other boys. Commanding the respect of teachers is not always what boys are about. They want to command the respect of the other boys around them. And as a teacher, when you're saying for the 5th time, "I told you no, why aren't you paying attention to me?" He's playing to his group, whether he's a 5th grade boy acting in a jerky way. He's playing to his group. And you have to understand what motivates a boy. And we tried to address that in the last chapter, Raising Cain.
I hope people read Raising Cain. It is well worth every single moment that you're going to spend on it.
Oh,
and
thanks.
You've written 10 books overall, which I should say, Dr. Michael Thompson, thank you so much for dedicating so much time and effort and wisdom and love into improving the lives of boys, not only in schools, but also outside of schools. Thank you so much for being here.
I'm delighted. Thank you. I really enjoyed it, Chance. Enjoy your boys.
What do you think after listening to Michael Thompson? Does it make sense to redshirt most boys as a matter of course in kindergarten? Would you reconsider it with your son? How about in 5th and 6th grade? Leave a comment. Let me know. Do not hold back. Also, please like this episode and share it. Subscribe on YouTube, Apple, and Spotify, everywhere else. And we do have a full slate of topics coming up. We're talking romance, work, stoicism, what really counts as success. We're delving into porn, weed, men's renaissance of faith in America. I'm really interested in that. If you want to find the central hub, it is allboyallgood.com. I'm Chance Seales. See you next time.